Zero. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Come check this out. Hey guys, welcome back to the CNC Auto channel. I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic, and tonight we're back on Project Retro Joe. If you don't remember, this is our 78 Corvette. It's been off the road for about 20 years, and tonight I got a special treat. I'm going to show you how to tell if this thing is going to start. So come on and join me. Okay guys, so the first time that you want to go and start an engine, you need to tell if the engine's seized up or going to move internally without any kind of restrictions or whatever. So what you need to do is turn the engine over by hand. And so on this particular engine, I've got a wrench down here on the bolt on the front of the crankshaft, and I'm going to turn this engine and see if it will turn freely. You see how that pulley and everything is turning as I'm moving this wrench? That tells me that this thing is not seized up, so that's a good sign. Now, once we're sure that it's not seized up, we can do a myriad of different tests, but I'm going to try and jump ahead a few steps, and we're going to see if this thing will crank over on its own, and then we're going to see if it'll try to kick over with a little bit of addition of fuel. So come on, let's go see. Okay, so we know that this thing's not seized up, it's turning over by hand. So the next step that we want to do is we want to turn it over with the starter. So I've got a good fresh battery in there, and I'm going to go ahead, I've disconnected the fuel line. I have also disconnected the coolant lines, so there's really nothing going on that's going to restrict this engine from turning over. I know it has oil in it because I checked the dipstick tube. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that engine over and let it sort of build up a little oil pressure, try and get that oil moving through the engine for a second. So let's see what that looks like. So come on. All right, let's see what this thing will do. I'm just going to crank it over. Again, there's no fuel going to this. It's just going to be turning it over. And so we'll watch this engine and see. And I'm going to watch in here and see if there's an oil pressure gauge and see if we get pressure. I'm watching this oil pressure gauge, and so far it's still sitting on 0. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Come check this out. Come check this out, babe. So we've got Mrs. C in here. Come check this out. We're going to crank this thing over, and you watch that oil pressure gauge right there in the middle. See, it's sitting on 0 right now. But you see how it went up to 40 or so? That's good. That means that oil is starting to go through the engine, and this thing is ready to try and fire. So it's time to try and see if this thing will fire. So I've got the carburetor sort of pinned open so that these chokes aren't closed. That way we can go ahead and spray directly into it the starting fluid, because remember, we don't have a fuel line going to this thing because the fuel that's been sitting in that tank, if there's any left for 20 years, doesn't need to be running up here. And of course that carburetor probably needs rebuilt. So I've got Mrs. C, say hi Mrs. C, sitting in the car, and she's going to turn it over while we put a little bit of starting fluid in there, and let's see what happens. So are you ready, Mrs. C? All right, she's ready. All right, go ahead and turn it over. Let's see what's going to happen here. Woo! All right. All right, look at that. Good job, babe. Oh, cool. All right, guys, so you saw what happened. We're trying to turn it over. We gave it a little bit of starting fluid, some ether, and it tried to kick over. That's a great sign, guys. You know what that tells us? That tells us that we've got ignition that works, and with a fuel source, this thing might actually run. And since it tried to kick over a little bit, it almost ran, you know. That tells us that maybe, just maybe, that we've got decent compression on at least a couple cylinders. So, hey, this is all good news. Guys, obviously you can tell I'm pretty stoked. I'm excited. This thing will run. So we gave it a little bit of some starting fluid here, and man, it tried to kick over. Mrs. C was cranking it over. Thank you, honey. And so I'm excited. I mean, the next step is let's get this thing cleaned up. Let's get this carburetor rebuilt. Let's change the plugs. You know, let's get this thing ready to start and run. Fix the brakes, and you know what? We'll be driving this before you know it. So stay tuned for the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this. I sure did. And thanks, Mrs. C, for filming. Hope to see you guys again real soon. Thank you, and God bless.